for this evening. Looks like on our agenda, the first one for Kevin Thorne has been removed from the agenda, is that correct? It was
Yes,
crossed out?
yes, he canceled.
Okay.
It's one point.
Okay, then let's move on to the number 2 item, the shoreline application for Stephen C. Jones and Jody C. Jones. Before we get going, did everybody sign or are signing the clipboard? Yeah, for signatures for attendees, thank you. That would be most helpful. Okay, Gary, would you like to lead us through?
We discussed at the last meeting, this is basically an after-the-fact permit,
Okay, this is an after-the-fact permit.
which reflects on what is actually constructed versus what the original permit was to construct.
Okay,
326 Sandy Cove Road, it's on Long Pond.
yep. And this is a non-conforming lot, is that correct? And the distance from the normal high water mark?
Do we have a full-size site plan rather than the reduced one?
Didn't look at any of the fact about the full size.
I was hoping to get through some of those things, just so we know how we're starting off, right? So distance from the normal high water mark might be a good thing to know. Because we want to get to know whether or not this is a complete application, and if so, if it meets the standards, then we can go forward on it. So, I mean, I've asked for the distance from the normal high water mark. Does the board feel that that's a pertinent thing to have documented? We don't have a full-scale thing, so we're going to take some time to scale this to get some kind of a...
Well, assuming that this was reduced proportionately to the original site plan,
which was...
it appears to me this is a conforming structure, but I noticed in some of the materials we were provided, there's an allegation that it is not, and I don't know which is which without.
So possibly conforming structure, possibly not. Would the board feel it important to dive into that right now?
I think we should move on.
Move on, okay.
Figure out what we have and what we don't have.
Okay.
I got a question before we get going further, before we go into this whole thing. Has anyone done a site review of this property?
Site visit, right?
Yeah,
No, maybe Gary
I've
has,
never
but
done
I,
several times, yeah.
As a planning board member, I have not been to that.
So Gary, did you measure from the normal high water mark?
His original permit he submitted showed 115 feet. And in reading this info from the attorney, it says 155 feet, so I was a little confused when I read that.
Peter, I would suggest we put that in the parking lot for now
Okay,
and come back to it.
Yep,
I mean,
sure.
obviously, if it's a non-conforming structure, that's a big deal.
right.
But, you know, we may wish to do our own site visit. There's a variety of ways to skin that cat.
Sure. Yeah, let's let's move on, and, so, for items that we need for this, if you don't mind, if the board doesn't mind, just, I'm gonna refer to the shoreline zoning ordinance to read to the audience, so we know where we're starting from. So, Gary would be looking for, the town would be looking for a permit application to include, a site plan that shall include at a minimum the location of the existing and proposed structures, roads and driveways, walkways, waste water disposal systems, drinking water well and lines, power lines, rights of way, stormwater runoff control measures, property lines, drainage ways and intermittent streams, vegetated areas, normal high water mark of the lake, pond, stream, or wetland. Applications for additions or alterations of existing structures, is that what this is? This is an after the fact thing, so this would not, would be a new structure. Okay. So Gary, when you were reviewing this application, and I'm sure they consulted with you about this, did you, what kind of issues did you come up with, or did you see?
I haven't looked at it very closely because I haven't had it that long.
Yep, okay. So for the board members, what do we have for questions about the application so far that we can address to tonight?
Is the applicant here tonight?
Yeah, it's, all right. But you're not Mr. Jones, you're Mr. Cunningham, you're the lawyer?
Right.
Okay, all right, so you're representing the Jones?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So we would then address them to him.
My first question, I have a series of them. I'll let Rich ask the question that he has, which I also have. But in item number 7, you list both the total lot area and area within the shoreland zone as 53,641 square feet. Is that really correct?
Well, I can't certify it, Jack. In the cover letter that Steve Jones attached to the application, I assume it's in your copy as well. He said that those were good faith determinations based on review of the documents as to their best knowledge of their property. They seem to be saying that all of the lot area is within the shoreline zone.
Based on the site drawing, I don't believe that's correct.
Yeah, and I understand what you're asking.
The other thing, other question I have that I wanted to ask was, where it provides on the first page in the box, the proposed structure square footage listed as 784 square feet. Doing the math, that seems to be an error. That doesn't include the porch. I believe the correct number should be 1,008 square feet.
You wanna go through the logic on that, just so
Yeah,
we're clear on?
so if you go to the drawings on page 1, 2, 3, 4, the top view drawings, they're 28 by 28, that's 780 square feet, but that doesn't include what appears to be an 8 by 28 porch, which adds another 224 square feet. And again, that number may be slightly wrong because of the fact that I'm taking that off of the site plan that we were provided,
Right.
and the scale may not be entirely correct.
May I comment on that?
Sure.
I can tell you that I received a PDF copy of the survey directly from the surveyor some time ago. And although I didn't bring one with me, when we printed out, first of all, the surveyor tells us that it is in fact to scale, and the scale that you see on the plan, it matches the plan. So as you change the size of the plan, that scale is changing with
Okay.
it. So that it is possible to use that to get a concept of what are the distances involved. And I never received a full-size plan, but in my office, I printed it out at 11 by 17 because it was easy to work with. I didn't have to drop that in.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful, because that means when I took, I think it was a 50 scale to this, well, anyway, once I took an engineering scale to it, that indicated to me that the 100-foot mark is approximately where the well is, making that a conforming structure. And it also led me to the 224 square feet for the porch, for a total of 1,008 square feet of proposed new structure.
And that sounds reasonable.
So if that were the case, and if you agree to what George's talking about, Mr. Cunningham, about the dimensions, then that would mean that the application should be amended to reflect that.
I'm assuming, and you can tell me quicker than I could look it up, that the porch area being covered though not enclosed counts as part of square footage.
It does, as part of the footprint.
And I think your logic is clear.
What other things do we have?
You want me to continue?
Go on,
Sure, others have questions. I was just curious if trees were cut in the course of constructing this building, and if so, if we have any pre-construction photos or some kind of inventory of what those trees were, because they'll need to be replaced.
I don't know about photos. I did ask whether any trees had been cut. And Steve and Jody told me, and they sent me an email to that effect, that it was helpful to you, that there was one, basically that area had been relatively cleared before. It was essentially clear of trees. There's underbrush and so forth. But there was one dead tree which they said they cut.
Actually, I'm wrong, R&I, Rich. If it's over 100 feet away, the trees don't have to be replaced.
Yes, there's another part of it, that the cleared opening on a lot has limitations of 10,000 square feet or 25% of the lot, I believe. So it's possible that, well, put it this way, it's not the issue of replanting the trees that I potentially see, but whether or not a cleared opening was created that's bigger than permitted. And not having seen what it looked like before, I can't speculate on that.
Assuming it was just a dead tree, though, that probably.
Yeah, that would be fine.
And that's what they took. They said that's the only thing they cut, of trees. Shrubbery, yes.
So do we have an issue with the tree that was cut?
I'm satisfied.
Okay. Rich, did you have some questions?
I had a question that kind of related to George's first question, and it had to do with the square footage of unvegetated surface. It relates to it says total lot area is 53,641 square feet. Based on the site plan, that's not all in the shoreline zone. So we can, when we calculate lot coverage of no more than 20%, we only look at the amount in the shoreline zone.
Right.
We can't include the lot area outside the
Outside.
shoreline zone for that 20%.
Mr. Cunningham, do you know what we're referring to when we say that?
I do.
So So I would say then the lot area within the shoreland zone value must be amended on the application.
I understand.
I don't have a question, but I have an observation or a point that I personally think that regardless of what, well, not regardless of what happens tonight, but I think for the planning board to see this particular lot and especially in relationship to driveways and things like that, I personally think it'd be worth our while to look at to take a site visit to the property.
Agreed.
Peter, I have one other item that
Yes.
is missing that we require in the site plan, and that is the location of the new septic system that's proposed. That's not showing
It's
on the
not
site
shown on
plan.
here? Okay.
My understanding was it was a separate application, the septic system had been submitted, it shows the location and has the soil. It's not in the package you can give tonight.
Yeah, that's correct. We just have the, Gary's approval of the new septic system, which is adequate, at least in my opinion, to meet that particular standard. But the overall site plan, if you go through the list in the ordinance of the items that need to be shown there, one of them is the new system that's proposed.
And what page was that, George? So we can tell Mr. Cunningham.
It's
We want to make sure
of
we
the
reference it.
application, or,
Yeah, that lists all those things.
oh, in
Was that
the
63?
ordinance, you mean?
Yeah.
It was the section that you were referring to before on page 62, the permit application, the
Yep.
scale site drawing. It has a list of all the items that
So,
are
Mr. Cunningham,
required, and one of them is wastewater disposal system.
so it's under section
On
16,
page 62.
16C on page 62? Okay. What other questions do we have about this applicant? Pete?
In the power line, what's the setback between the detached building here we're talking about to the power line? Do we know the footage on that?
So what's the required distance from the power line?
What is the distance?
Oh, what's the actual distance?
Right, there's a setback on that.
Do we know what the distance is? Yes.
Aside from what's shown on the plan,
What is the distance on the plan?
on the plan, it looks to be somewhat over 20 feet.
How do you figure that?
I'm looking at
I'm looking at this, right?
yeah,
Yes.
How do you figure 20 feet?
well, I look at the scale and see what distance 20 feet occupies. And
This is greater.
moving over, it looks to me like the distance between the nearest point of the structure and the power line is slightly greater than what the scale shows is 20 feet.
Okay, all right. And what does the ordinance say? What's the setback anyway in that?
Power line?
Yeah.
We don't have a
CMP has
might be a
their,
CMP.
Right.
That's what I mean, CMPs, that's what I'm getting
so
at.
that doesn't matter to us.
It doesn't? It's never taken into consideration on the applications we have?
I think we are aware of it, and we talked about it with the applicants,
Right.
but we have no administrative charge over that.
Oh, really?
We've only used it, to the best of my recollection, when considering when a structure might be moved, whether it's feasible to move it.
We also
And how far?
talked about it, in Beckett House, when they put in their addition, and CMP went up, looked at it, and their concern was if you have to remove snow on the roof in the winter, you know, how close you are to the wire. And I think they had said something like 15 feet was adequate.
That's what I recall.
before we get too far ahead of ourselves, though, is that a CMP line, or is that just a private line?
I believe it's CMP.
Gary, you think
It
it's,
only serves the structure.
okay, so it's just like the line to any of our homes, so it's a private line?
Not a transmission line.
No.
Yeah,
It's a
private line.
residential service.
Service part.
Don't carry any ladders near.
I can scale it to almost 20, looks like 20 feet.
Good.
Yeah, thanks for the discussion. Yep.
Absolutely.
I said I just scaled it to, and it was a little over 20 feet.
What other questions do we have, or comments do we have about the application at this time?
The letter that was sent in to us tonight via email, someone's got an issue about the easement setback or something like that. We gonna talk about that now, or?
We may want to get into that in a minute, but I wanted to look at
Okay.
anything that would be administrative first.
All right.
To look at completeness, because it seems like right now we have several items that are lacking.
Okay,
So, but I want to make sure we enumerate them and tell.
An obvious one, obvious item lacking is, we weren't provided with the contractor DEP certification number on the application. We know the name of the contractor, but we don't have the, and since this was a foundation, built on a slab, I assume,
Yes.
that would be required.
So, yeah, we would need the number, you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it says on file, but it should be on the application. On file isn't good enough. Gary, I have a question for you. Looking at the photos, it's kind of hard to tell. Is there a lot of unvegetated bare soil there, or?
Well, that was actually rocky driveway that existed for this existing gate.
Oh, I see. So that's like pre-existing gravel?
For the most part, yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then it would count towards the area of unvegetated area.
It would, as well as the sidewalk. that
Yeah.
goes in the-
Even though it may not be shown on the site drawing as driveway.
That's way more than what the buildings are, so it must be included in that.
Yeah. Hopefully. The reason I asked the question was I was just wondering if there was need for some additional soil erosion control.
What's the height of that structure?
There's a plan for that. No, that's the plan. The 6th page,
I can see,
16 feet to the wall.
and then, is that 812 pitch?
No.
6,
512.
512? Okay.
So that'd be, that's 28 feet wide, correct?
Yeah,
So 512,
so maybe
14 times 5. 70 inches. So it'd be 6 more feet, 70 inches, just under 6 feet. So it'd be 16, 22 feet.
Okay. Thank you, Craig. Okay. And, let's see. This is an accessory structure, right? We talked about the distance from a driveway or road. Is that meeting that part?
I'm sorry?
When we when we have an accessory structure, is supposed to meet a certain distance from the side of the roadway. Does this building meet that? I think that's gonna be on page, what is it? Three? Maybe.
Or possibly four.
Hang on, how about page 32?
Yeah, didn't seem to me that either the setback from the boundary line or from a public or private road were at issue here. But
Okay, good.
that's my own assessment. In terms of, you know, the standards in the ordinance.
Right,
I
okay.
mean, we have other information about a dispute with regard to easements and the like, but
Okay. All right. Any other questions right now about the application?
I don't have a question about the application, and maybe I should wait on the question that has to do with something in Mr. Nagel's letter that I was gonna ask, but it's not, I guess we're dealing with whether the application is complete at this point. I'll hold on.
We may be wrapping kind of that part up. I'm not sure, I'm not sensing any more questions. I've got 4 things that we need for the application at this time.
I guess I just have a clarification question. On the first page, over on the right here in the box is plus 88, and I wasn't quite sure what that's in reference to. It's under present structure square footage, which is listed as 1,080 square feet, and then it says plus or minus 88. Is that just to give us a sense that there's maybe as much as a 88 square foot margin of error, or?
I suspect, I don't think that's really what was intended. And I have to confess to you that I'm not sure what Steve had in mind when he wrote that, so I have to ask.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So are there any other issues about the application? So for me, I had 4 things that, for the application that we, by our conversation, we need to have either amended or added to be considered complete. One is the square footage must be amended for the lot, or square footage must be amended, right? The lot area within the shoreline zone must be amended, that also a new septic must be included on the site plan. And then we need the DEP certification number on the application. Those are the 4 things I think we talked about tonight. Did I miss anything? Okay. If not, those are definitely 4 things that we would.
Did you capture the site plan needs to show the septic system?
Yep.
If you go back to what the question was, present structure 1,080, that is the existing plant. Where it says plus 88, I believe that was a shed right there.
Oh,
Oh.
so,
But
okay,
if we're going to amend this application, that's something we're going to complete.
yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Good find. Okay. We should probably get into some of the other things that are less administrative and more relative to things we found. We have the letter from Mr. Nagel. Is that correct?
And I'm the homeowner, he's my attorney, so,
Oh, okay.
so he was able to make it.
Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it. So,
As I was looking through this, there is one typo on page 3. Identify the area home. Second sentence should be the Jones as opposed to Smith. And I do appreciate the diligence you all
sure.
taken to this.
Yep.
But there was a question, or would you like me to?
Oh,
Oh,
question I had is maybe more whether Gary is aware of the concern, or it talked about and it really is not directly dealing with this application, but that there was supposedly a deck added to the front of the primary structure back in 2010, and whether or not that was permitted or was.
I missed that beginning. I don't know, I have to check that out.
It's on the bottom of page 1, last paragraph. Anyway, that was just an issue I saw. I just wondered what the real answer was. If the town is aware what the answer is, of whether that structure was expanded toward the water in
Right.
2010.
So is that a question mark? Do we not know that answer?
Sounds like we don't know the answer.
Okay.
You said we didn't give them a permit to expand towards the water.
Right. Okay. This is kind of new territory. We don't do this that often, or unfamiliar territory, after the fact permits and for things like that, that are as controversial as this one. So please bear with us if we try and get through some of the intricacies of
I
it.
understand, and the original permit was something that was consistent with what both the deed restrictions are on our lots, that the community has. But what is actually exceeds the deed restrictions, and we have a separate court action going on that, so.
Okay.
Essentially, the deed restrictions say that they're allowed to have a garage, and what was built is second lot.
Okay.
That's one of the things that would be.
So please, board members, feel free to jump in here, but since you brought that up, sir, your name?
Jeffrey Stiff.
Okay, Mr. Stiff, thank you. Thank you for showing up tonight. So, for our purposes, right, we have the shoreline zone ordinance that we go by. The other matter you're talking about, I appreciate the context of that. But for accessory structures, we would have a definition for that, and that's what we would go by in any case, and that's how it's laid out for any applicant, just so you know. If something's done that does not meet that after it's been permitted, that's another matter. But whether it has or has not, I'm not trying to determine. But have you seen our definitions, or has?
My attorneys made me aware of that. So
Okay. All right.
I think one of the things that we were really worried about is just overburdening that watershed area. And even though there's a large lot there, it's actually bounded on two sides by both the lake and the stream that comes off of the lake on the backside. So there's a lot of wetlands area that crosses their property. So that what they're building on there is only about 8 feet of an acre. And so even though they have a large land area, when it comes to buildable area, it puts a lot of pressure on the water area.
Okay.
Just a comment, Peter, that's one of the reasons why we have this lot coverage standard in our ordinance, that we address, at least that's a portion of the way that we address that kind of issue, make sure that the individual lot isn't overly covered with unvegetated surface.
Or the area within the shoreline zone.
Right.
Right. And that is why, when George brought that up before, to get that calculation done, that's pertinent to that calculation. So when we're looking for accuracy for that value about what is actually within the shoreline zone, then when you say percentage of lot coverage, that's applicable to only that part, so that will change things, I think, I suspect.
I have a question for Mr. Stifford.
Sure.
Just following up on your comment, is your concern for stormwater runoff, or is it your concern with regard to the amount of loading by a new septic system, or both?
It's really both. And because on the property is also the easement for the road and cul-de-sac that the association uses because we're the end lot. And so there's a fair amount of space taken up by that easement as well.
Two items I guess we should talk about, at least in passing, just for everybody's benefit. First off, a question for you, Gary. No variance was required from DHHS for this new septic system. It met state plumbing code, right? Oh, it required a variance, and it obtained the variance. Okay. And that was issued by DHHS, the state agency. The other, just for everybody's benefit, in the audience primarily, when we approve of projects that involve new structures or expansion of structures in the shoreline zone, we do so with a condition that all the stormwater, in this case the stormwater off of the rooftop, be managed in accordance with Maine Department of Environmental Protection best management practices for stormwater management. There's a variety of ways you can do that, but the ordinance requires us to make a finding that the stormwater is not going to be an issue. That's how we deal with that.
So in a case like this, for an after the fact permit application, that would still be a standard condition.
Yeah, standards are the same whether it's after the fact or before the fact.
So just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. What other items do we have in the,
Excuse me, so my name is David Dean.
Hi,
I have a
Mr. Dean.
camp down in Sandy Cove too. So the water is coming off there and the existing structure. And right now it's not according to DEP. Does that have to be put in these plans too? Is that another item that should be included?
I'm not sure if I understand your question. We're talking about the roof water runoff and then
the
everything going off?
plumbing. You had mentioned there's several ways that it can be handled.
Yep.
Right.
So how would you determine if that's been done already or not? And if not, how would you go about making sure it was done?
I'll take a stab at this because this would be the way it would apply in any case. So in the event of an application that comes before this board that's permitted, and that standard would apply, construction would occur, and that one of the best management practices would have been implemented. Should the CEO go out to the site and see that it was not included, then the CEO would have then authority to do something with the applicant. We have not permitted this yet, so we would not have had that standard, but this, should it meet all the standards and it is permitted, that standard condition would be part of it, and then it would then be expected to be included.
Okay, and then it would be checked by Gary.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So did I miss anything when I?
Well, I would just add that where I was coming from when I was discussing that was looking at the photographs that have been provided as part of the permit application. It's clear that in the front of the porch, there's no stormwater, doesn't appear to be any stormwater management. usually, those buildings like this are constructed with, along the drip edge, a gravel, area for, so that the water can infiltrate into the ground rather than run over the surface of the ground, picking up phosphorus and moving it to the lake. It's less than clear from the photos whether that's true on the other sides of the building. And so I think that's something we're gonna have to look at when we do a site visit.
Right.
Unless there's some other kind of method that they've implemented, like a rain garden or something of that nature.
I was just wanting to see if they have, great, they've met the conditions.
Yep.
If they haven't, I was more concerned what steps.
Hopefully we won't have 3 feet of snow so we can see.
Right, that would be helpful to not have, yeah, be buried in snow. What other comments do we have? And, we did receive several emails from people who, I think it was the Bean family, right, that sent one. We have that as part of the records. We have that here with us. Mr. Appleton, is that right?
No, he's not here,
But he was another person that sent it, so that's part of the record. I'm not sure if we have to go through everybody's, to read everyone. I'm not sure if people care to do that. But maybe at this time it
How
might
many
be,
did you get?
see now, here's one from the Bean family.
We
There's
got,
another one from the
3 in
Appleton.
total.
Yeah, 3, right?
Your 2 and one other,
And-
Mr. Appleton's.
Yeah. It might be appropriate now to hear from Mr. Sutton. Jack, you had something you wanted to say about?
Yeah, I have 2 things, Mr.
Sure.
At the last planning board meeting, there was a question of how much of our land is, where the adjoining land was to the north side of this. How much of our land would be affected by the setback distance between the well and the septic system. And our son does that. He's good at map making professionally, knows what he's doing. This is not run by a survey, but I think it's a fair representation of what the building envelope is on our land and how it would be affected. So I have a picture of this here, and I'll pass, there are 6 copies of that.
Sure,
I'll get
thank you.
to pass them on.
Okay, thank you very much.
And while you're doing that, I just have a 1-page summary that I'd like to make as part of the record.
Okay.
This is drafted by the proposed consent agreement that's involved in this process. I'll leave copies of that with you, and
Okay.
you can pass those
Right.
too.
Thank you, Jack.
And I'll read it in the record for tonight. Okay, if I sit down?
Please do.
Okay. The location that I've listed the map there. Our personal interest, my personal interest, because my wife is gone now, but my heirs will be our son Richard and my daughter Nancy. And we're all pretty much in agreement about this. To ensure that the right of way over the Sandy Cove property, Sandy Cove Road, from the number to our property, remains unimpeded.
Right.
And that means unimpeded by trees or unimpeded by too close presence of a septic tank that is liable to fail if a logging truck, and some time when maybe need for a logging truck or a welder or anything else in the future comes along. We're concerned about that. And that's where we need to know where that tank is in relation to the edge of the road. And I see a bunch of flags down there now, but I don't know exactly where that would be. And also the restriction on our land, we have no plans to develop that land. And our idea would be to keep it undeveloped, but I can't speak for the future, the long-term future. And we're concerned about the encroachment on our property because of the old setback provision. it is a restricted area, that's the point. And the map that you have is based on a standard survey of our property, but it shows what we believe to be the high water limits, the actual high water limits, based on years of observation, and the setback from the high water limits for 100 feet all the way around the point. When Mr. Jones first approached me on this, on the site, he told me it was going to be a garage. And he said he was going to do some rearranging of his parking area on his property that would be across the access road on the extreme side to make room for parking after he built his garage. I felt there was no problem with that. As built, we see a two-story standalone building behind the pre-existing building. The new building having expansive windows facing the electric, including at the time, the kitchen, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I haven't been in the building, but I've heard that's what the case is. I believe that an after-the-fact plumbing permit was issued to validate drainage connection from the new building to the new septic system for the pre-existing building. The Belgrade CEO mentioned in the last meeting a value of $250,000 for the building value. I can't confirm that myself. But that's the value that was mentioned. A consent agreement that's been proposed, I understand, would sanction the new building with certain kitchen components removed, plus expansion of the on-site septic system and a payment of some $3,000 or a little more. The legal cost of the town, which is just 1.3% of the CEO's estimated building value. I won't dwell on the implications of this consent agreement for Sutton, just as these were expressed to the former town manager before he left that position. We have no current, I'll use we, including our children, we have no current plan nor interest in selling or developing this land, but are concerned with potential future ownership. And these are the concerns. Precedent is important in public affairs. I've seen it time and time again. The word gets around. This is not something that's going to be contained in this meeting here tonight. What example does this proposal set for the many people who are dedicated to the letter and the spirit of Belgrade shoreline zoning law? Conversely, will it embolden those who will distort that spirit at personal advantage by obscuring plans with the expectation of forgiveness for divergent results? Restoration substitution. Does this agreement provide for ongoing town inspection and enforcement procedures to ensure that prohibited kitchen facilities are not repeated or be substituted by plug-in hot plates, microwave ovens, toaster ovens, etc.? Living alone as I do, I can see, I hardly use the stove at all. We use it as a toaster oven or a microwave. Changes. What, if any, changes should be considered for Belgrade shoreline zoning ordinance, building, plumbing, and occupancy permitting, and inspection and enforcement procedures, those loopholes that are now recognized by Belgrade shoreline zoning ordinance and its administration as a result of this case? I would ask you those questions.
Thank you very much for your time. Yes, go ahead, Gary.
I spoke a little too soon when I said that the state had approved the variance for the septic system. I actually need to call the state and find out how they want to look at it. When Kane Coffey from Coffey Engineering designed this system, he designed it for a replacement system because it's one system that will serve the existing house as well as this new structure.
Oh, I see.
Okay, so he designed it as a replacement. And Brent Lawson from the state approved the variance, but he's pretty specific. And he says that these structures with 3 bedrooms per structure are not existing. And I don't see how we can count the new one as existing, because it's never, So
Right.
it had a septic system,
Right.
okay? Then the septic system will have to meet first-time criteria, which means 100 feet from the water, it has to meet all the setbacks, there can't be any variances given. So I need to call Brent Lawson from the state and find out, this is an odd one, because it's one system, and it serves an existing structure as well as a new structure.
Right.
So
Okay. Yeah, I misinterpreted this.
that's the interior plan,
Ah,
yeah.
okay, so in essence, that's another area that, where the application is not complete, and an important one.
Right.
Is we need to have documentation of it, of the septic system's approval
Right, you know, you can't.
before we can
I
act.
don't see how you can, I don't see how you can call the new structure an existing structure that's in need of replacement septic system.
Right, yeah, no, I mean, I think that gets to the heart of some of the comments we've received, that we have to treat this like the structure doesn't exist,
Right?
Right.
same standards as if it was.
Yeah. So I need some clarification from the state
Okay.
and see how he wants to handle that.
Okay, so, thank you for looking into that, that would be an important aspect of this. Mr. Sutton, I wanna make sure we address your questions that you presented to us. If that's okay, we can try and get through some of these things. Some things we won't be able to answer I won't be able to answer very well, I know that, but Anthony is here, and I know he may be able to chime in on some things, and any of the other board members can too. Pete?
I had a question, Jack, on your screenshot here. Where is Jones' property here in this screenshot? Which lot is it? I can't figure it out.
This is the property line right here.
That's, so, this is Jones' property here?
This is Joe's property here.
All in here?
Yeah, it's actually a shallow angle. It comes way back across the stream here to almost a point.
All right, so your land is here and here?
Our land is, except for a small slice of land down through here, our land is here
Yeah.
and here. This is the stream that comes in here.
Your land is, this your land here?
This land right here, this is wet down here.
Oh, what are these green lines here?
Those are 100-feet lines in from the shore. They put the building on them.
Oh, okay, so what's this yellow? What's in here in the yellow?
The green line is 75 foot and the yellow is 100 feet. Yeah, so this
Oh.
doesn't really go justice by 100 feet.
Oh, okay, so this is all, oh, I thought these are lots here. Oh, okay,
Our lot is this point, we own that point.
okay, okay, so this is all, got, okay.
So you're actually what's listed on this handout from Mr. Leander, is that who bought it from there?
And this is Jones land, papers way back. Like this.
Oh, okay, thanks.
This right here? Yep. Is what I think that is.
Yep, that's correct.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. So, okay, sure. If you don't mind, Jack, we'll just try to make sure we address your questions that you brought up, and hopefully to your satisfaction for this evening's discussion.
Well, I think my real underlying surprise in this whole thing is that here's a lot of 120 feet on that's correct, on the adjacent lot, not ours. Already has a 2,000 bathroom operation. All of a sudden, what we build is a garage, there's another house, so really the same size. If that was a standalone new operation, at least the spirit, if not the letter, of the shoreline zoning?
That is a great question, and I think when we talked about this last, Gary, tell me if I'm wrong, the information that was presented initially showed it as 200 feet of,
Yep, and it showed it as a garage, it doesn't show it as a three-bedroom home above the ground.
so there are definitely errors or inaccuracies in what was presented. Then later, there was a discovery of the shore frontage not being accurate, and then more discovery of what was constructed was not only just the garage.
And one other thing, I have no doubt, okay, between Gary and you do all this and some of the, possibly ongoing, with good faith effort to correct the problem and fix problems. But I have real personal concerns about the message it sends to the people all around the lakes of the quality of enforcement of shoreline zoning.
It's a fair statement, that's for sure. At first glance, the long arm of the law in Belgrade for shoreline zoning is one resource, and that's our CEO. After that, there would be other things that could escalate, but everything really has to come down to what is shown on the permit, what's presented for a permit application that's presented to this board, and if it should be permitted is all that is constructed. When actions take place outside of what is permitted, we would have no visibility or authority on that.
But in other words, what mechanism is there to prevent somebody currently or a different owner putting a kitchen in that building?
In this particular case,
Yes.
I would have no answer for you on that.
I don't have an answer either. I think one is needed before you make a decision on it, though.
Agreed. Anthony?
I do. You know, that would involve us policing every single accessory structure in the shoreline zone. You know, and so we don't have the authority to go into people's homes and say, we need to see if you can have a kitchen in your garage. So, I think that's important.
Pete?
I think, yeah, it's an interesting point to bring up, Jack. The process of having these homes, you know, buildings in town, whether it's shoreline zoning or not, is they're assessed. And the assessor goes out and makes some type of observation, inspection of these buildings. So indirectly, and there's, you know, a kitchen goes in this particular case, it should be caught in the assessment. Then the question is, well, does that information on the assessment, is that, and especially in shoreline zoning, is that compared, you know, by, let's say, the CEO or someone, you know, we see that there's the assessor says there's a kitchen in there, et cetera, and the prior assessment doesn't say there is, says there isn't, then you say it's a kind of a red flag, and then you can research it, that type of
The
thing.
thing is, when he gets a permit to construct that structure, the assessor's gonna go look at that structure 4 or 5 years down the road. If he doesn't get a permit to do anything, the assessor has no reason to go back inside that building. So, in terms of, did he put a kitchen in 3 or 4 years from when the building was completed? The assessor's not gonna see that.
Yeah.
So,
I bring up the point because in the past, I have an experience with nearly the same thing, that same building.
so,
But there is no way for us to determine whether someone put a microwave,
No, there isn't.
microwave, or toaster oven into.
Well,
So
then
the-
what good is it in taking the kitchen out and assuming that that solves the problem?
One of the things that we did in the, well, I didn't work on it, but Dennis did, with legal counsel, is in the consent decree, it needs to be registered at the registry of deeds, and it's clear that there can never be a kitchen or any cooking facility in this structure. That is part of the consent agreement. It gets filed at the registry.
So as far as the policing of this going, how did we get here today? How are we here right now? How did it get reported? How are we here?
It's supposed to be just a garage.
Yes, I understand that,
So-
but how did we get here?
By
You're
complaints
talking
from
about
neighbors.
policing.
Yeah.
That's,
So as citizens that reported it to our CEO, and that's the way you police it. And that's how we got here to this day, and that's how it's gonna have to work, because we can't police everything.
understand that the citizens have to take action as opposed to the town.
Well, the town takes action as when they're notified from the citizens.
And the town has taken
Even
it.
if the town says, you put it in the deed, it's gonna have a picture, the town can't enforce that, only the citizens.
Well, they can't enforce it either, but they can bring it to the attention
Right.
But they can bring, but they
Anthony.
can bring it.
as part of the enforcement.
Yep, yeah.
This is just right. The town has no jurisdiction, authority, or interest in existing.
Right.
and we've been doing that in the past when we've been given permits for garages. We stipulate in the permit that it will never be used for a kitchen.
Well, typically we do
Well,
that with bunkhouses.
Right,
Right.
right, and that's as far as we can go.
That just has the advantage of setting it up for easier enforcement on Gary's part and the town manager's part
Correct.
in the
And
future.
And in the future, if that property changes hands,
That's right.
whoever buys it at least knows, oh, can't put a kitchen in here because it's specified right to be.
Right.
And that doesn't always happen either.
No, but
I mean, the reality is shoreline zoning is basically voluntary in this town, is what it comes down to, because we don't have any comprehensive compliance effort. Just because of virtue of the limited hours of code enforcement.
We have one
You know,
resource.
So it's all based on citizen complaints, and that's it.
And
It's better
honesty
than
of the
some
landowner.
towns and not as good as others.
And honesty of the landowner.
And actually, I didn't get a citizen complaint on this building. I went down in the springtime because I knew they had been working on this throughout the winter. And when I drove in, I saw it. I didn't even get a complaint.
So, we didn't notice.
So that is enforcement, and we wouldn't be here today.
Right, that is important.
That's an important thing.
One other question I do
Yes.
have. When this structure was going up, it was mentioned one tree was taken down, but there were other trees not on the site of where the structure was put, but there were other trees up by the road that were removed. And what Jack said, it's kind of flagged out, like that's where they were gonna put a new septic system. So I don't know if that falls in to removing too many trees from the property or not. It's a question.
Are the stumps still there, or have they been bulldozed out already?
I bet you they've been removed. There may be one or two there.
If you look at the photos, this property is pretty treated.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trees on this property.
Yep.
I don't know how many they, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they violated the ordinance and cut too many.
I wouldn't wanna cut too many on the backside, because that looks like it go right to the neighbors.
And if it's beyond 100 feet, doesn't matter anyway.
Right. George?
To get, first off, I don't think we have a complete application here.
Agreed.
First off, so we're gonna end up having to table this tonight. But that aside, thinking ahead to when we do have a complete application, assuming it seems to me there are three deal breakers here. One is whether the septic system gets approved
Right.
and is able to be approved. Another is whether or not they have will have more than 20% of unvegetated area coverage.
Right.
And we won't know that until we know what area is in the shoreline zone.
Correct.
And thirdly, is this issue that Jack raised of the shore frontage. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, or anybody, they still have to meet the 200-foot frontage, right?
Not for a garage.
Not
If,
for-
if in fact this is not a dwelling unit, you need 200 feet for a new lot or a new structure. Let's say a new lot in the shoreline zone has to be 200 feet. If it's less than 200 feet and it has an existing structure or it's a lot of record, then someone can build on that without a variance because it's a non-conforming
Because
lot.
it's not conforming, and this is considered an accessory structure rather than a residential structure.
Yeah, an accessory structure, you don't need the double frontage.
And the only reason that is the case is because of the lack of a kitchen.
Yes.
That's the only reason why this isn't considered a
And I
residential
fully
structure.
understand Jack's concern here about, you know, we walk away and it's easy to put a kitchen in, and so it's about the only way I could see to really, take amendments to the ordinance, tighten up what a residential dwelling unit is. But for, as we're dealing with this application, I think we, in terms of approving or denying, have to go, Jack used the term letter of the law versus spirit of the law. I don't think we can make our decisions based on spirit. I think we gotta make our decisions based on the law as it is. And if they take the kitchen out, or cooking facilities, if you will, then we don't have a dwelling unit, and therefore they don't have to meet double the frontage, double the lot area, or what have you.
Gary, in the state plumbing code, what is considered a kitchen?
I don't know, I'd have to look at that.
The reason
Dwelling
I,
unit, their definition of dwelling unit would be pretty similar to what's in the shoreline zoning law.
because,
I don't think.
I mean, are we gonna, we can't prohibit popcorn makers, right? Or, but on the other hand, you can do a lot of food processing in preparation without a range. And so it's that conundrum that is the reason I ask. And it's really all gets down to what's the adequacy of the subsurface wastewater disposal system, as well as the frontage. Because if it has a kitchen, it has to have 200 feet of frontage on the lake.
And the only way to tighten that up, we've talked about this by a few in the past, because this has happened several times. We've issued permits for bunk houses, and then the lady was eviction. And one of the short ways to tighten that up, if the board was even interested in doing that, when you issue an accessory structure such as a bunk house, with a condition that there can't be any plumbing at all, not just a kitchen, but there can't be any plumbing.
True.
And that's up to you, but
But can we do that?
you can do it if it's in the ordinance.
Oh, I see what
Or
you're
even
saying.
if it's a condition.
Mhm.
You can put conditions on it.
Yeah, but you can't just make conditions up to,
You're making up one that says you can't have any cooking facilities.
Well,
No,
we're,
that's
in
in
that
our
case, we're just
ordinance.
reiterating what's in the ordinance.
like,
The dwelling unit says,
we could
consisting
get sued.
of sleeping, cooking, and,
That,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So you take one away, you don't have a dwelling unit. Another way
Cooking,
to deal
sleeping,
with
and
it
toilet facilities.
in the long term, we prohibit plumbing in a bunkhouse, which I used to think a bunkhouse was a bunkhouse. You went out and slept in the bunkhouse and came back, kind of overnight sleeping for guests or whatever.
These aren't Baxter State Park bunkhouses.
The
by any means.
the other thing is you could define a dwelling unit as having any two of the three things constitute a dwelling unit. And, basically, you either get a kitchen, you get a bunkhouse, bunks, or you get a cooking facility, but you don't get two out of the three. That's not in our ordinance now, anyway.
And one of the reasons I raised the point is because of the suggestion made by Mr. Stiff and his attorney of, and gives an example from the town of Cushing, Cushing, where they prohibited, I assume this is a condition for a permit, prohibited from storing or preparing any food products in an accessory structure. And so, you know, that, for me, that gets into a pretty gray area, because, again, making popcorn, that's food preparation. Is that really what we're talking about here, or are we concerned about a broader issue? We'll need to come to terms with that, I think, if and when we get a complete application.
Right.
Gary, did you say that the consent agreement does have a, I think last meeting, I thought I heard you say the proposed consent agreement has a condition in there that says, kind of reinforces the no cooking facilities. It says it right in there. Oh, then, I'm sorry, that wasn't the question. The question was, does it have a condition that the code enforcement officer, upon notice to the landowner, has a right to inspect the facility? Kind of gives you the authority to notify the
Well, you have that authority anyway by virtue of the ordinance.
Right, it's been a while since I looked at it, but I think it actually said something to that.
The consent agreement doesn't include that.
Yes, sir.
Would it be worthwhile for you gentlemen, you've heard the concerns here, and they're legitimate, and obviously there's no definite answers to these, but would it be worth going through an attorney as a board to express to them, to see what they could come up with to improve the ordinances and give you more power when things aren't done? Just food for thought.
Sure, sure. That, yeah, consulting with some professional, a subject matter expert to help tighten up things is something we could do. Just so you know, this was just brought to the voters last year. We have a large effort to go through other ordinances to bring to the voters for next year. And we cycle through several of them. So it is an effort, not that it can't be done, it is just, there's only so many volunteer hours in a year.
No, and I understand that, and I appreciate all the time you guys do here. You know, I'm sure it's kind of unrewarding feeling at times, but believe me, as far as I'm concerned, from what I've heard today, you guys do a great job, and I appreciate it. But I just think, you know, on going back to this, you know, if you go through the ordinance, you could put priorities on these things too, instead of maybe just taking a section, looking at the whole thing and saying pick and choose.
Yep.
Just an idea.
Yeah, it's good, it could be a good approach. Yes, Mr. Sutton?
What about the state? Because the town, this can't be a problem that's unique to the town of Lebanon. This must be a universal problem. The town ordinance has to be at least as strict as the state ordinance. So if there's a problem with the town ordinance, it might be worth having the state consider the problem as well, and having it fixed, if not just another, possibly with the state.
That's a great point too. That might be something we could consult with our contacts at DEP who have worked on this in the past. What do you think, Rich? Is that?
Yeah, and it's something that when I was there, we knew it was a potential problem. It's, you know, it's like, how do you enforce this issue? But I'd say it was never fully addressed, but it's one of the things where you kind of depend on enforcement of, but, again, it goes back to, as soon as Gary leaves, there's nothing to prevent him from digging out the microwave and, the cook stove or whatever. But,
And that can be said about any type of enforcement on anything.
Yep.
So it's just not with this.
Right.
Any type of enforcement, a person, as soon as they're gone, can dig it right back out and go right back to it.
Right.
So just to pick out one thing is kind of hard.
Right, very true.
This one thing affects all you guys, and that's where it's coming from. But there's a whole wide town here with a lot of structures and a lot of people. And I get what you're saying, I understand your concerns, but to try to, it's a small town.
So I'm thinking, do we have any more comments or questions on this particular application? Because we've identified at least, several gaps. I think, Mr. Cunningham, you understand what they are, is that correct? So, are there any more comments about this? If not, I'm sensing probably a need to make a motion for a path on this. Pete?
I'd like to make a motion to table this application, and then also if this board go out and do a site visit, go from there.
Okay. There's a motion on the floor.
You gotta have a reason for it being tabled. We didn't
Oh,
stipulate it.
well, incomplete.
There we go. Thank you. So, motion on the floor
I'll second that.
and seconded. It's coupled with a site visit, so that's interesting. Any other comments? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. None opposed. Rich is an alternate, so we're good to go. Next matter, logistical thing, decide a date or dates or something. But before doing so, Mr. Cunningham, is it okay if we do a site visit at the property?
Absolutely, and I would encourage you to go in what may currently be a gap in the inclement snowy weather.
The problem with that is we have to announce to
You
the
have to
public.
announce and let public come too, I understand.
Right.
But I guess what I'm saying is, please, yes, we appreciate that, and do it when you can best do it, thank you.
and I agree with Mr. Cunningham, we get snow on the ground, we lose our ability to see the unvegetated area. Gets a foot of
Indeed.
snow or something, we're in trouble.
Indeed. Mr. Sutton?
Question, just procedurally, there's a consent agreement that's, that was shown in front of the town manager. How does that stand in relation to your responsibilities? And so that,
My take, it would have, it would not. It would not,
Doesn't affect us.
doesn't affect our judgment about what's being presented in terms of an application.
We don't have any information about that consent agreement other than what was just said here, so it doesn't have anything to do with us.
But may I respond?
Sure.
Just to tell Mr. Sutton, it's my understanding that the select board recognized that because approval by the planning board was necessary, they're holding off on further consideration of the consent agreement until such time as it gets through the planning board. You may want to check with the select board to confirm what I just told you.
okay, that clarifies.
Yeah. Thank you. That's good information. Yeah. But just to be clear, right, we would act only on what's presented in front of us.
And incidentally, if maybe everything be while you're down looking at over, I know I can agree with it. That's really what you do.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
See what the
Thank you. So, should we schedule a date for a site visit?
How long do we have to post it in the paper?
We would need to allow, is it 2 weeks, I think, is that correct, Nick?
A quick question, does it have to be posted, or does it fall out?
Only if there's 3 or more.
If there's 3 more, has to be posted.
3 more
So
people?
it's a public hearing at that point.
Does it actually
It's a
take 2
public
weeks?
meeting, yeah.
Public
It
hearing.
doesn't have to.
How long, is it 2 weeks?
Well, I thought, well, yeah, I guess it would be 2 weeks.
If-
So, yeah.
As a town board, without a
Well, if you got,
If
if
3,
3 of us attend,
then it's a,
then it's a public
it's a
meeting.
right.
Council.
So the other way to
Meeting,
skin this,
Official meeting of a committee.
the other way to skin this cat is to not do it together, no more than 3. I mean, that's fair.
You can't discuss
That's
it.
the letter of the law, the spirit of the law.
Right, right.
Yeah, can't we do it singly as well?
Yes,
And if I go down by myself, do I have to get permission to go on a property
Right.
store?
it's not required, I would just say out of courtesy, just to make sure that those people impacted would see you down there, so maybe,
I can tell you, you have the Joneses' permission to go individually or in groups as you choose.
All right, so we got that noted?
We just need to be careful if we go down individually, that we don't make the same mistake that the town of Booth Bay did, that resulted in the lawsuit against the town, where they had ex parte communications with abutters and other interested parties.
so, right, note of caution, that a site visit is a site visit, it is not a meeting with other people.
Right.
It is not a discussion, it does not include emails about the visit, right? It is not any of those things. It is boots on the ground, you're looking, maybe you measure, whatever.
That was the basis of the lawsuit regarding the expansion of the botanical garden stand.
All right, so you don't, any name that's come over, you just don't talk to them, just identify yourself, you're doing an inspection, and that's it, that's all I tell them.
It's a site inspection,
And when you get back together to discuss it, that's a public meeting.
that would be.
Correct.
Okay,
Right.
thank you.
So in other words, it would not be, if I went down there singularly, I wouldn't email Pete and say, hey, Pete, did you know, when I went down there, I saw this, 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 and this, right? I would not be doing that, that kind of communication would not be part of it. I would bring it to the planning board at the appropriate time.
Are they living there currently?
No, they live in Missouri, so that's what I
Okay.
So are you going to do it individually, or are you going
Yeah,
to publicize it?
we're trying to find out, yeah. So what is the board's take or interest?
Well, I can't do it, I think we need to, I think it's time is of essence with the weather coming up. And so I think we should do it less than 3 people. So in other words, 2 for 1.
Yeah, because we got a storm coming, they say 3+.
Right. I know I can get down there Saturday morning. I know I'm going to the transfer station, so it's easy. After doing that business, to go right down the road. So. Yes, sir.
Just be careful, there's a hill on that road, one part of it goes down Park Street to where you would be going at the very end, the north end of it.
Okay.
We went down there last Saturday, be careful, you're very icy, maybe up down the back all right, but the road is, it was at that time, very icy.
Okay, thank you.
I went in and out today, and it's good today.
The hill is paved, so that's why it might be a little bit, trickier.
Understood. So I'll just put it out there, I'll go down on Saturday morning. I don't know. I'll claim 11 o'clock. Give me time to get down to the transfer station and go down.
I'll meet you there at that time,
Okay, great, thanks.
just the 2 of us.
Then others can find some other times over the next several days. You know, I know family obligations are gonna come about in 6 days, probably, with Thanksgiving. So we may have other things to do, so maybe between now and Thanksgiving, it might be really good. Okay, so is that all right with you then? Okay. We haven't yet voted, yes, we did vote, yeah, so this is tabled. Do you understand what needs to be done?
And I assume that when we can get this back together and get it back to you, that's when we'll ask you to put it back on.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep, you're very, very welcome. Yep. Thank you very much for coming in this evening.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time. Good evening. Thank you. Safe travels out there.
You as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Anytime you guys are interested, we have openings for other alternates.
It's a good plug.
Unfortunately, it's taxation without representation today, but if I lived here,
Well, I usually say to board members, and this is, we're all here away from our families in the evening and so forth. But I'm getting paid, I know you're volunteers, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks.
And we get a lot of zeros in our
Thank
check.
you.
thank
Yeah,
you.
too. See you guys. Yeah. All right, so,
So we're gonna keep all this paper that out.
yep. Yep. So Gary, thank you very much.
There's 250 feet into, and then crosses 90 feet. So then I took the 120 down here, and I took half of that, so I went 105.
Oh, really? Okay. Have a good one.
So I went 105 times
Saturday is the
250.
23rd, right?
Triangles.
I made it into a square, basically.
Oh, okay.
So I took out where it was 120 and
Okay.
90. It's 30 feet difference.
Oh, I see, so you squared it up.
Dunn Road?
So I took 105
Is
times
that right?
250.
Yeah, Dunn Road, right? Dunn
Came
Road.
up to 26.
Go past the transfer station?
Yep.
Like you're gonna go
250 square feet.
south towards, Wing,
Oh.
Wing, yeah. Wings Mill.
So,
So if you're at 7,600, 7,200.
And right,
Yeah, right.
Same size as transfer station.
So
It's got a big F.
it should be
okay.
20% of that's 200,
That's where the driveway is, where the big rock is?
would be
This
2,600.
flat rock standing up, and it's
So
got a F.
roughly 52,
Yeah.
probably 5,300 square feet.
All right,
so they should,
cool.
And that's
Alrighty,
just rough
Ephrata.
going by the-
All right, we have a couple more
They
items
have
to go over.
70,
Pete will be back in here in a minute.
75.
And Nick is not here. Not
But that's to be determined, would be
Right.
more accurate if we had,
Did you do some back of the napkin sort of calcs
you
a little bit? Okay, great, thank you for doing that.
so basically in shoreline zoning, they come up with 26,250 square feet within the 250 feet,
Did you say 26,000?
250.
That's the calculation of the area that's in it,
That's
and therefore 20% of that would be the value that we need
about
to know.
52, 50, 5,300.
Okay. All right, so whatever that, however, these other structures match up against that. is
And I
the
was
thing.
trying to scale off this, so
Yep.
it's rough.
Rough, yeah, fine. Good to know. Alrighty, Pete's temporarily indisposed, but we do have a couple things to get through on our agenda. Thanks, everybody, for being patient as we go through this. Discussion of subdivision ordinance update. So this is an agenda item. Nick, thanks for putting this on. So we met with a person from the KV cog. George was there, Anthony, myself, Mary Vogel, Kathy Wall, and this person. It's Nick Ashour? Did I say it right? Yeah. And very nice fellow, young, industrious, he's energetic and he's willing to help us. That's one thing. Another thing, this is for the subdivision ordinance updates. Another thing, we asked if the work that we would be asking for his consulting services and helping us get through all this, would that be met, would his services be met by the dues that we pay, or would there be other services rendered? Or would we have to pay for the services rendered? And its dues would cover it, is what he said. So that was very exciting to learn that. Which means that proceeding And we had some questions, and I'm kind of glossing over, I'm sure, several things, but those are some big things to talk about. He's willing to get going. They asked when we wanted to do it. I was saying yesterday would be good. So I'm hoping that we can, if the board likes this idea, is to proceed with this. And then this next calendar year, undertake revision to the subdivision ordinance to bring it up to speed.
So what we had, let me give you a little bit more background. This came up in the context of the comprehensive plan implementation committee, which I'm the chair of, because in the comprehensive plan it calls for updating the subdivision ordinance. And so that's been part of the recommendations to the select board that, that be followed through. Anthony had decided, well, let's just invite somebody from KV Cog to see if they can do it for under our dues, or whether we need to contract it out. And as Peter's already mentioned, the good news is that they can do it just as a virtue of the dues we pay as a member of KV Cog. What we're hoping is either at the next meeting or shortly thereafter, inviting him to meet with the full board to basically develop a scope of work on what we want him to do. So, for example, what updates from the comprehensive plan do we want incorporated? What legal issues do we want fixed? The obvious one is that the definition of subdivision doesn't even comply with state law. What else do we want addressed, say administratively? You may recall when Chris Huck from KV Cog helped us redo the amend the commercial development review ordinance. One of the things he did was he reworked the whole administrative section in an effort to make it a little clearer to people to the extent they read it. Stuff like that. There's something I'm missing, but anyway, so you get, I think the gist, it would be to invite them back to develop a scope of work so that they know what they've got themselves into.
So won't we have to sit down as a planning board and go through the subdivision ordinance together and decide on kind of what we need, what areas we want to get fixed beforehand, so we all know? I mean, your ideas may be different than my ideas or whatever,
Sure.
but shouldn't we review that as a group, kind of like we did with the shoreline zoning ordinance, before we step into it and find, kind of highlight the areas that we want to get fixed?
We certainly could approach it that way.
Sure.
As a group, that way we kind of get in some sort of agreement, we're all aware of what we're going after.
Sounds good.
It's just a question of how far deep in the weeds do we want to get, beforehand. We kind of ran into that with the shoreline zoning as well. But I'm fine with that.
I got a thought is, I love these model acts, So, like getting into subdivision, other towns have gone through it. Does KV Cog have a model we can follow for lakefront type, communities? That'd be my first question to them. If they do, we could take a close look at that too.
He said that would be something he would bring to the table.
Yep.
I don't know if there's a model ordinance per se, but they're beaucoup examples.
Right. And he
There
mentioned.
used to be a model back when
There
Dan
was a state
Fleisch
planning
came,
office.
a long time, back, 20 years ago.
Right.
I don't know if they've ever updated that or not.
Yeah.
And this fellow did talk about having these examples around, and the impression I got is that is that KV cog has seen, towns implement, their own subdivision ordinances based on the examples. So it becomes much more routine format, shape, and direction. There might be some things specific that each town would wanna have, but it seemed like overarchingly, there are ways to make it simpler, more like a.
Yeah, so if you had something like that, and then, Greg brings up the point, take a look at ours and see
Yep.
if we can,
Yeah,
modify it, make, do what we need when we're down or whatever,
One thing
That'd
that's,
be easier to do it.
not unlike with the shoreline zoning that'll come into play here, but, is that our subdivision ordinance or any town subdivision ordinance has to be consistent with, the comprehensive plan. That's an actual stipulation in state law. So
So it has to be word for
one
word?
town's subdivision ordinance will vary from another town's depending on variations in their comprehensive plans.
Probably be worthwhile for everybody to actually read the subdivision law too. That's what it's just
The subdivision law, what do you mean, the subdivision?
The
law?
state law.
State law. Basically, our ordinance has to be consistent with state law as well.
Right, yeah, right. I think that's something, at least I'm hoping that we can rely on them for.
I would prefer myself, yeah.
Good. Other than the definition,
Yeah.
something like that.
can get for it?
So there's a state subdivision law? So that's the model there. No?
Not really, it's not all that detailed.
Yeah, that's it.
Oh,
It just kind of paints a big picture of what you have to have in your ordinance and what things you have to consider when you make a decision to approve a subdivision.
okay.
Where can Nick find that? Where can he get that from the state?
Gary gave us those land use law books, it's in there. If you know what I'm referring to. It's in Title 38.
There you go.
Yep, exactly.
What's the year of that one?
2018.
Exactly.
And who published that? What agency?
Present issue.
State
They
agency?
only come out every 3 years,
Huh?
don't they?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
They only update it every 3 years.
Who does it?
Oh, the 18th? I ran into Fred.
You know,
Present
what
issue.
law, what agency? Environmental protection or,
No,
So-
what?
no, it's something done at the, I don't know if it's done at the state level
No,
or.
no, that's private.
Private,
That's
right.
Fred issue.
Huh?
Oh, Fred Mishu, like in state planning office, the
Yeah.
floodplain guy?
Is he a floodplain guy now?
Used to be.
Yeah, I think he's DOT now, or whatever, but I think he does that on the side.
Oh, okay.
That's written right on the bottom.
Because the
Yeah,
state planning office also did that.
Oh, this is the state planning office?
Or used to be before LePage got rid of them.
So, this is done in 218.
Yeah, this is a private concern that doesn't count.
Oh, but what agency is responsible for the state? That's my question. I don't think it publishes, print it.
Oh, you mean the law?
Yeah, where'd it come out? What agency?
I think, I don't know. It used to be under the LePage administration was economic and community development, but I think it might be changing back to the remnants of what is now the state planning, was the state planning office, which is housed in agriculture, if you can believe it.
Right.
One thing that, in addition to looking at the current ordinance, I could provide to Nick, to provide to everybody for the agenda for next time. I assume we're gonna have that discussion at the next meeting, maybe not. But for whenever we're gonna have this discussion, is the list that we had created previously of, the recommendations in the comprehensive plan that need to be addressed in this ordinance. We're you know, we had previously found deficiencies, or not deficiencies, that's not the right term, but places where we needed to make sure it was consistent.
Oh, this planning board did that?
Yeah,
When was that?
Comprehensive plan, did it,
Huh?
right? Planning board.
no, we did
We
it.
did it, yeah. It was like
Back when we
4
were
years
working
ago,
on the,
maybe?
Yeah.
Huh?
Commercial development review on
Oh.
stuff.
Yeah, before that.
Before
Before
that.
that, yeah.
10 years ago?
Hmm?
10 years ago?
No, it was after the comprehensive plan was adopted in 2014,
Oh,
so maybe 2015.
Yeah, around 2015.
yeah,
It was sort of a work plan.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we could just see.
So do we want to do that first and then invite Nick to one that follows that meeting?
Yeah, I think so.
So if that were the case, do we want to have this discussion at our next planning board meeting to focus on that type of stuff?
Yeah.
Then be prepared for maybe the next meeting or 2 meetings later to have Nick come in.
Yeah, because then we're bumping against Christmas and all that,
Right.
so. But, yeah, that would be a good approach as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't think we need at this next meeting saying, oh, I want this you know, I would argue for this paragraph to get changed or that paragraph to get changed. I think we want the big pieces.
Right. Right.
Just so we can all review it
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's,
and
it's,
then listen to what he has to say.
yeah, that's a good suggestion.
So at the next meeting, a review of the old subdivision ordinance, then at the next one, a meeting with Nick. Is that what
I think that's where we're kind of, yeah, there, so.
So approach this the way we've done it in the past, where we like set aside an hour for this discussion,
I think so.
and then if there's any permits, deal with them in the second hour.
Yep.
Oh, why can't we do the permits first?
Either way, yeah, no, definitely. Do permits
Yeah, if
first.
we have permits, yeah, we can.
As long as we're diligent about cutting it off.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
we can
what
cut it
always
off.
happens is we never get to the discussion about the ordinance.
Well, the only permit we got coming up really is, next meeting is nothing, right?
No, we might have this
When-
back.
yeah,
Are we
when
gonna
did
have that
tonight?
back in time?
Maybe.
Maybe?
Who knows?
Well,
Maybe we got
Possibly
Thorne,
Kevin
Warren,
Thorne.
is he coming back?
Yeah,
Thorne.
right.
He'll have his stuff.
Mr. Thorne.
yeah, but just, okay, so permits take precedence, so over updates.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay, so that's that one. We had on here, application process discussion.
Something Anthony,
That was something Anthony wanted to discuss, but
He-
What-
stay
what-
long, he wasn't feeling it.
What's that all about,
Yeah.
basically?
I,
I don't know. You started that process, didn't you?
we did. I think what he was looking for, I don't mean to speak for him, and I'm probably not doing it justice, but was to make sure that when a citizen comes in and applies for a permit, that it's as efficient a process as possible. And if there's a way to first perhaps go to you, Nick, to say, hey, do I have all the pieces? Here's my cheat sheet, here's my permit application. When on item number 7 it says to do this, if there's a question, can they turn to you perhaps? And you can not fill it out for them, but say, oh, this is what we mean. I'll just use it in a kind of a silly example, but if someone says square feet, what does square feet mean? You can say, oh, that when you describe that.
Nick and I had this discussion before we
I think that's the idea. I think I suggested, and maybe we have in the past, we have asked that people supply 2-scale drawings. I said, can we supply him with grid paper? You know? Yeah.
With what, grid paper? I got some right here.
Thank you, Pete.
Here,
Hey, I'll give you the pad. Just put
while we're
50.
on that topic,
Is it turned off?
I was been thinking about this more, and I was thinking that maybe I should put my money where my mouth is. I was wondering if there would be any value. Rich, you may recall, in addition to the instructions and the permit application, Rich did a sample soil erosion control plan. I was wondering if we came up with a sample site drawing, whether that would have any value to applicants.
I think that could be really helpful, especially in light of,
Or at least those folks that tend to read things.
Even at page 62, we're reading today, in the ordinance,
yeah,
that's pretty specific as to what they're looking
I think so. I think it is. And it can be a little daunting, you know, if someone is like, oh my gosh, I look for all these things.
Well, a member of the public, of course, is never gonna read that, they're never even gonna find it, but, but, you know, we could maybe highlight that in an example.
Right. Right.
Um,
And maybe by providing this example of a site drawing you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah.
That it could be done in such a way that a person could be assured or feels more confident that they can do it, as compared to say, oh my gosh, I can't do it, or I have to go hire an engineer, or something like that.
Right.
This is a can-do thing. It's very accomplishable.
I took a few minutes, because I was just curious, what do other towns do? And you know, in this watershed, well, those towns that have anything on their website at all, you gotta get past that first. But oddly enough, Oakland's got 0 on their website.
Really?
Yeah, but I looked at the towns in the Sebago Lake watershed, or most of them, and I looked at Reedfield, the ones that we've always looked at in the past, trying to find examples of things like Reedfield, Winthrop. I looked at Monmouth. None of them have, you know, I was hoping there was something we could, you know, steal, basically. A number of towns have in their application form one sheet that's basically a piece of graph paper, but it, you know, prints out as a part of the application. Not unlike what DEP does with the Natural Resources Protection Act application. But that's the closest I found, so it would probably have to create something ourselves.
So in that example, one of the points that I was getting to is people aren't gonna be able to figure out. So at 384 feet of frontage, what scale do I use on the graph paper to represent that 384? I mean, how many squares? And you kind of got to explain to them how to do that.
Oof. Wow, if we have to get down to, you know, 8th grade math,
Well, let's see,
that's
someone's
gonna
got,
be tough.
someone's got 380 feet of shore frontage. They
What
got,
size do you
they got
draw
enough
that?
money to hire, you know, expensive consultants.
An engineer?
Yeah, right.
Well,
So,
they may
I'll
or
be
they may
realistic
not.
about that.
They may or they may not. I
Well,
think.
99% of the time they are. So maybe if we focus on, you know, the typical lot, you know, that 100 feet, 200 feet. You know. Most of these lots are 200 feet or less around here.
Okay, so what would 1 square represent in footage?
Okay, well, so, well, here we go. All right, this-
Depends on what size graph
So
paper
you
Well,
you use.
let's say the typical stuff you buy at the store, you know,
Yeah.
so there's what? 1, 2,
Yeah, they come in different,
yeah, this is
Things
typical
per
here.
inch.
Right.
One square is
This,
10
this,
feet.
this 10 there, there's 20, all right,
There's 1 square 10 feet, and that's 200 feet.
yeah.
So, but just
And this is going the short side.
I think explaining it, like how Craig is saying, I think is helpful for a person that's not
Right.
used to doing it.
So if we came up with an example, use this typical stuff you buy at the store, and use this one for example.
yeah,
Throw it
but
in.
you
Yeah.
can buy 10 to the inch, you can buy 5 to the inch. I mean, you know, I'm not capable of teaching people 8th grade math, okay? To be blunt.
Yeah, I know, it's, I know.
If that's what it takes, I'm the wrong person.
Right. And I don't think the board should be doing that, right? But I think just my own opinion is a quick summary to help in case someone had a question. So if you said, oh, an inch, one of these squares on the paper, or one of these squares represents 10 feet, that maybe could
Yeah, that might be
pave
good
the
I mean, a
enough.
good approach is what,
Part of the application package, take a Xerox copy of this one here, you know?
well, I think
Lay it
Nick
out.
has been handing them out
Yeah.
graph paper,
Yeah.
and then,
They get a piece of graph paper.
yeah,
Well,
I
and
mean,
put it,
tax-
you know,
your
put a,
your taxes at work, you know?
one block equals
But your
10 feet.
point's a good one of
To start
basing
it.
it on your sort of stereotypical,
I haven't
you know,
averaged that.
The average shorefront owner.
yeah, or lot,
Typical, whatever.
yeah, you know, sort of,
There's nothing typical.
well, except that most of them are non-conforming, right, that we see.
Right. So they'd be under 200 feet.
They'd be under.
So, now if they had 80 feet of frontage, we'd be looking at a drawing this big.
Well, yeah, well, maybe you could figure out, they could double, you know.
Well, and then,
double it,
you know, right, yeah,
Two-
so,
two-
how do you
two blocks.
explain to somebody, okay, then you use 1 square per 1 square per foot, you know, versus
Have 'em
1
talk to
square
their
per
wife.
5 feet?
I talked to the teenage kid in high school, they'll figure it out.
Well,
It's good.
I'm willing to do a sample, I'm not willing to teach 8th grade math.
Right. And we've talked about this before, that the responsibility is of the applicant. You just don't wanna make it harder for them. If there's a way to make it somehow, as straightforward as possible, so it's not too arduous, then great.
I mean, if this doesn't help, then I don't wanna waste my time on it, okay? Is what it comes down to. I mean, we'll be probably the first town in the state to have done this. And everybody has the same requirement, because it's in the state minimum lot size,
Someone asked
a
me
minimum
first.
shoreline zone.
Somebody asked me first.
Huh?
Somebody asked me first.
Well, yeah.
Cutting edge, man.
But I'm just saying, you know, are we gonna just improve things, or are we gonna make things perfect?
Yeah, so, something that we could do is offer sample scales right on that sample drawing. So, you know, if it's from 0 to 100 feet, use this, you know, recommend a square to be a certain amount of feet. If it's 200 feet plus, recommend a square to be a certain, so we have a size that they just don't go off on themselves and have this weird size, so 300 feet and above, a square could be, possibly be this many, represent this many feet.
Yeah, it could be 30 feet, you know, 1 square equals 30, something like that. Well, then it's tough. Well, then you gotta be creative, you got, you can always tape these together, you know, and double, you know, make it bigger. That's what I'd be doing, you know.
That's probably what I'd do.
I'm not,
But George is volunteering to do this over and above the other volunteering that he's doing, so.
George is the guy.
So, anyway, that's about the application process discussion. George, thank you for considering doing this. I think the last thing we have on our agenda is a shoreline map discussion. We had received the email from the fellow at CAI. Rich, you have that in front of you?
I read the email and I see the map. He said that apparently, my reading the email, it wasn't resource protection based on moderate and high value waterfowl to begin with. I think he said it looked like they just put a buffer around the wetland itself. I haven't looked at the NWI maps. I have to see if that's all forested wetland. where the resource protection shows. But it's hard for me to believe in a way that, well, put it this way. I'm not sure what that means, or how they ended up with that resource protection the way it is, if it wasn't based on the area being a moderate or high value wetland with a 250-foot buffer around it, because I guess it really comes down to, without seeing the NWI map, I don't know, if it weren't resource protection for waterfowl and wading bird habitat, why the whole thing is resource protection.
You're talking about North Bay?
Yes. Maybe there's a forested wetland that surrounds that whole area, but it's hard to believe that the whole area, it may be. Craig may have a better idea. When you leave the wetland, the non-forested wetland, and it becomes forest, is that whole area at least 250 feet of forested wetland before it comes up on high ground? Or, so,
Like down behind. Let's see if that's bigger. So, where it comes up onto all this stuff right here, there's a stream that runs down the edge, and it's bog on that side, and it's immediately hardwood
the one that's,
on the forested side.
you're,
Elevation starts going up.
Yeah,
where are you at?
all this stuff right here. So, I believe,
Yeah, yeah.
you know,
so-
this is the top of this is,
yeah.
where my subdivision would be.
Is it steep? Could it be resource protection?
It's steep in part of it over here, but not so much over here.
Some of it's just flat, relatively flat, and it's go into upland.
Yeah,
No. See, I just don't understand where they're coming from saying it wasn't based on it being moderate. high
Down in
value.
this
It should
area?
be all resource protection otherwise.
down in this area, I bet that is forested
Yeah,
wetland
yeah,
right in there.
yeah. I suspect this whole area here, right? But anyway, Peter, I haven't looked at the National Wetland Inventory maps, and I think I need to look at slope and,
Moderate,
like I said, it appeared to me as if somebody said that was moderate high value, just put 250 foot completely around it. But as Craig's saying, some of it, if you take the criteria of moderate and high value waterfowl habitat away, then we're only really looking at what are the steep slopes, what are the forested wetlands that are at least 2 acres in size, and those areas would stay red, but the other areas could go to limited residential. I really don't understand where he's coming from. I guess I would say at this point, let me look at those and I can talk to the fellow and try
Okay.
to steer him in the right direction.
Thank you very much.
I haven't done that yet.
All right, thank you very much. Because that email just came in this week sometime.
Yeah,
ago.
3 or 4 days ago, I guess.
Yeah.
Like all that stuff down behind, well, it's in Smithfield, so it doesn't matter to us. All that stuff down behind Sweet Dreams or Tripod now, that's all forested wetland.
Yeah.
And that works its way up the flats a little bit, but I think from pretty much the Smithfield line up, it goes right from bog to dry.
Yeah. How about that big finger, that long finger there by the boy, that goes alongside the Boy Scout camp or whatever that comes in?
On the bog side, it goes right from bog, that's a big gravel aquifer, I don't know if you call it an aquifer, but that comes up in the air, and that's all gravel and pine trees.
Well, that's
And it
Snake
goes
Point.
right down to the bog, and right at the base of it is the bogs, where the bog starts. So where the bog and the dry land starts, it's a definitive line.
Yeah, that Snake Point is probably a little bit less than 250 feet or pretty much. That whole Snake, they call it Snake Point. That's all. It probably isn't more than 250 feet across.
Well, yeah, but up by Bombazine, it's a lot wider than that.
Yeah, right, as you get out there, it's, yeah. But it's high.
But it's a pretty definitive line.
Right.
It goes from bog to dryland.
Yeah.
You can walk it. Colby College has boxes buried in the bog all along there.
Colby College, what?
Have test boxes or whatever they are buried in there. And you can, as you walk along the dry land, you can look down and see them in the bog. I
Yeah,
don't know exactly what they are,
interesting.
but they're Colby colleges.
Huh.
I don't know if they were used years ago and just left there. Unused now.
I keep hearing rumors about Camp Bomazine getting, broken up and being sold, or they're gonna sell pieces of it, stuff like that. Hear that every so often.
Really?
I'll report back next meeting.
Why, thank you very much, I appreciate
George
that.
can give his map, his drawing report, and then I'll give you my report.
Okay, so there are 2 agenda items, Nick. All right, is there anything else we need to talk about tonight?
I just have one thing, it's actually sort of related to the now offshoot of the site plan thing. In the course of doing that, I happened to notice, Nick, that our permit application and the instructions and Rich's soil erosion control plan are not on our website.
Instructions and
At least I couldn't find
permit
it. Where are they?
under code enforcement.
Oh, I didn't see them there. Well, could you double check?
Yeah,
Because I couldn't find them. I looked at both there and under the planning board.
okay. I can put it on the plan board. So
Well, that's where the commercial development, well, actually, the commercial development's in both places.
right. All right, yeah, I can put it on.
Great, Gary, any updates that we need to talk about? I've noticed that the transaction must have occurred because people are moving into the old town office.
Actually, we're still on
We do?
until Wednesday.
Oh, okay, so it's gonna happen. All right, good enough. Have you folks? seen
Yeah,
that?
they've been going gung ho,
Yeah,
tearing stuff out of there and built the little,
Right,
They're open now.
right.
yeah, which, that's good.
Did you buy the Minion?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been noticing them.
If nothing else, does anybody else have anything to bring up? No? All right, well, let's call it a wrap, 9:05.